Hello to the chicos and the chicas. Epic story I'm coming at you with, and that is none other than the fact that, remember my last video in which I showed you a remarkable miniature attack by the Spanish GM Izeta, Felix Izeta? Well, unbelievable. A couple of days later, I'm streaming, and reluctantly I thought, okay, I will play a couple of Blitz games. Usually we analyze games and do educational stuff, but I wanted to have some fun with playing, and so I started the search for a 3-2 Blitz. First game pops up, I see this guest chess GM. I'm like, okay, guest chess game. I see it's a GM, I hover over. Sure enough, who's my opponent? Felix Izeta. I'm like, unbelievable. And so it turned out to be a little bit of a longer story than that, because we played a fair number of games actually back to back. Not only that, the following day I streamed again, and again the first guy that accepted my challenge was again Felix Izeta. So I have got about 10 games played between the two of us in Blitz now. Not to brag, but I think I had the upper end of here, the upper end. I got the better of him, but to be fair, he was very slow, and I turned a lot of games around in time scramble that I shouldn't have won. But today I'm bringing you one that I really liked, not because I won it, but because I found that this game, when I played it, I thought it was ridiculously clean. Now, not quite the case, but let's have a look at how to beat a GM with, you know, the usual principle chess, playing according to those generic rules. So, he's a Caro Kann player. We played a lot of Panovs, and I thought, whatever, I will throw in a knight c3 just, you know, for funsies. And because of I'm really good at it, I completely forgot my knight c3 theory. Of course, my e4 repertoire for Chessable does recommend knight c3, but once again, yeah, I didn't exactly recall perfectly what was going on. Theory, I really don't want to waste any words on this. We're still following theory. I remember g3 because this was played in a very famous Tal Hübner game with the idea of a subsequent bishop f4. But my opponent, of course, who has been a lifelong fan of the Caro Kann, just blitzed out all these moves like there was no tomorrow. And it turns out that we're still in theory, which I thought was the case. But hereabouts was when I started to play moves by myself. So actually I can't complain. It's move 18 in an opening that I don't really play. So, but then again, this line of the Caro Kann lends itself to long lines and also reasonably easy play. So even if you don't quite know what's going on, you can figure it out. Actually, let me go back a little bit. So let's start with g3. I will start explaining from here. g3 is with the idea of finding a better square for the bishop. That square should be f4. Take. Bishop d6 is to deny that. And so now to find a better square slash diagonal for this bishop, we want to go to c3 to enjoy what this diagonal has to offer, but most certainly you would not want to put that bishop in front of the c pawn, but like this, when you can also break and you also have a beautiful central control. This is what a lot of amateur low-rated players would be not only reluctant, but they would not play altogether on account of weakening the king, which is just nonsense, because this king is not weak, and even more importantly, it's not attackable. I guess, therefore, not weak. Anyway, c5, bishop c3, knight f6, queen e2, takes. I took back with the knight. I think it was best. Now knight b5 is on the cards, so you had to play a6, and I played king b1. You want to know the funny story here? Still theory. I had zero clue that that was the case, but nonetheless, it is theory. What's even more fascinating is that the vast majority of games here, professional games. My opponent, by the way how you can tell, we are playing a 3-2. He has got 3:16 on the clock. We started on 3 each. So, yeah. So, yeah, what I was going to tell you was that the largest number of times rook d7 was played in this position with the very obvious idea of double up. Not in the top 3 of the engine's choices for black here is rook d7. Do you know what the engine choice is? Bishop c5. Guess what happened in the game? Bishop c5. And that's when I faltered a little bit. Because according to the machine, speaking of weakening the king, best move is b4, trying to force the trade bishop for knight, when our bishop would excel once again on the long diagonal. So bishop e7 is likely forced, when the also very natural rook d3 is one of the recommended moves by the machine. This is where things are going, well, ridiculous is really the only thing I can say. I don't even understand this move. Like, isn't this hanging? Or is there some rook c1? What? Wow. Rook c1, king b8, knight c6. Yeah, totally everyone saw this. I was the only one who didn't. With the subsequent bishop e5 check, winning the queen. Yeah, hello. No problemo. And what if queen d5, by the way? Bishop b2 check, and then knight c6 check wins. Okay, I get it. So we win the queen, right? So these totally basic things somehow did not occur to me, and I thought that the only piece on the board that I wasn't quite happy with was actually the d4 knight. Because it's sort of in the way of things, right? It's in the way of the diagonal, it blocks the d file, and I thought, actually, I would be very happy if this knight was on e5. And so I played knight f3, which I think is the only inaccurate move that I made in the entire game. My opponent played here queen c6, and here I found an absolutely mind-boggling variation. I spent a fair bit of time, I think, here. Hello? Look at that, from 230 to 40 seconds. That's irrational, but that is explained by the fact that I was on stream and I was commentating my thought process. I'll tell you what went through my head first, and then I will show you the bonkers city line. I saw that 95 I really wanted to play, and then I calculated the line, and I felt like I was channeling my inner Grishuk, only to be very, very surprised, by the way, but let me not get ahead of myself. So, 95, queen e4 check. And I saw that after queen e4, knight e4, seemingly I'm winning with knight f7, but no, because then my opponent has rook d1 check, rook takes d1, knight takes c3, bc3, and after rook f8, I concluded that at best, maybe that was equal, at best. I'll play it out in case you didn't follow the jungle of arrows. So queen e4 check, takes, check, totally forcing, by the way, check, and although I'm a pawn up, there is not a single thing I could poke a stick at that I like about my position. Now, what took me so long was to admit that my calculation about this was correct, and I couldn't do it. I just didn't want to accept that this so natural sequence was bad for me, although I knew it was. And then I came up with the correction, and I thought, hang on a tick. Actually, after queen e4 check, I can just go queen c2, which I did do. Now, this was actually perhaps an even greater, or perhaps this was the inaccuracy in the game, that I did play knight e5. Because the engine tells me rook d e1 is the cunning move to prevent queen e4, gain control of the e4 square, and then play knight e5 next and be better. Now, this is not what I would call principled chess, FYI. But I mean, you know, sometimes ugly moves on the odd occasion are the best ones. And so I thought, okay, I'm going to analyze this a bit. I will have a look at this. Rook e1, stopping knight e4, yeah? I had a look at it, and then I went like, okay, let's see what the engine wants. I look up, engine says knight e4. I'm like, what? Hang on, I just played rook e1 to stop knight e4. And of course, here comes the classic puzzle rush trick, that after queen e4, rook d1 check. Can't take because the queen hangs. I play king c2, they take the queen, I take the rook, the queen, sorry, and they take the free rook on h1. I'm like, what's going on? And then the engine throws at me this line. Bishop g7, deep breath, folks, deep breath, rook h7, bishop has nowhere good to go, knight e5. Hitting queen, hitting knight. knight c3 check. I'm like, what is this? And after bc, the queen goes out of harm's way with a check. And after king a1, which is better than... yeah, the engine is tossing up the king a1, rook g7, rook b1. And white is better, marginally better, due to, I don't know, perhaps the fact that I have an extra pawn, although that extra pawn is this one. Not exactly anything I would write home about. I would say that this is very even. So I'm like, okay, so much for playing a positional game and enjoying my, you know, chess principles. That line was just, yeah, raining all over the parrot. But after queen c2, my opponent, he failed to find the only move, which was bishop f2, or rook d1, and then bishop f2, utilizing the pin on the queen. And from here on out, I managed to get into the dream Caro Kann, which is, ever since I played c4, there was a position in front of my eyes when I closed them that I wanted to accomplish, and I managed to do exactly that. Watch. He plays rook f8, a really poor move, to be honest, covering f7, so I played f3, kicking the queen, forcing the trade, and after takes bishop d6, I played g4, and I was just pleased with the visual on the board, because this line of the Caro Kann, the Capablanca variation, from white's perspective, looks like perfection when it looks like this. Because if you go all the way back to move 6, FYI we are on 26, we play here h4 to chase the bishop, and then we chase the bishop all the way to here and here. Now the reason why we do this, other than the fact that it inconveniences the bishop, is because it creates this awkward bind on these two pawns. And so in many endgame scenarios, it becomes an issue for black. The counter argument to this, which quite often comes to the fore, that the h5 pawn becomes a little bit motherless and weak in endgame scenarios. So whoever's strategy turns out to be superior in the late opening middle game phases, that person or that side is going to likely have the better endgame, because it will be one or the other. It's either h5 is going to be a bit weak, or it's the pawns that will suffer from their inability to move forward. And so in this game, I managed to accomplish the ultimate Caro Kann dream of building this pawn chain up to f3, g4. And just one more move, and you realize what exactly this concept is all about with the pawns here. The knight can't move without hanging the pawn on g7, and the pawn on g7 can't move without hanging everything else, in particular the knight. But even just the take rook h6 idea demonstrates that the 3 completely dominates the 4, whereas I have got free hand with my 3 versus their 2. And so no matter how we trade, actually that's not quite true. If it was a rook ending, that would be dead draw. But any other endgame type, I'm gonna win it. Well, that's not quite true. If it was a pawn ending, it would have a quite strong chance for a draw too. But it's very difficult to go for black into a pawn ending without changing the structure. More on that in a second. Because after bishop e5, and you can see that by now my opponent is catching up with me on the time, because his position is becoming worse and worse. He took on d1, and I had a feeling by now that I'm like, I reckon he's gonna follow it up with rook d8, which is the classic mistake of the club level player, of just trade blindly, not thinking, not considering the circumstances. So I'm like, okay, let's take back quick. And sure enough, he plays rook d8. Now, to be fair to black, this position is miserable. The best move for black in this position is rook g8, which actually makes a lot of sense in light of my explanation of what was going on here with this pressure. The knight wants to go. And probably something like b4 or a4, and if knight d7, then either bishop back or bishop d6 would retain a very annoying pressure for white. We want to play c5, a4, king here, b5, go, go, go. Is it winning? Maybe, maybe not. Is it a nightmare to play for black? 100%. But the opponent played rook d8, and I right away knew that the pawn ending was dead lost. And the reason for that is, of course, I took and I took. And remember how I told you that the pawn ending would have been drawn maybe with the pawn here? Not sure, but maybe. But with this, no way, Jose. And now everyone will go like, oh yes, the double pawns are bad. No, it has nothing to do with the double pawns, or a little bit. The point of this endgame is, you know what? Actually, let's leave it for the reader to work it out as an exercise. No, I'm joking. But if you want to actually figure out what's going on, you can pause the video now and you can suss it out why this is winning for white. If you want to hear my reasoning, this is it. Very simple stuff. I've got 3 versus 2, which means I can create a pass pawn on this side of the board. That alone means zilch, nada, that's a useless fact. But because of the layout of the pawn structure on the king side, I can also always create a pass pawn by breaking through like so. It is absolutely unstoppable by black, because if black commits to e5, that allows my king to come in and win the game without even having to try. And so I knew right away. Just looked at it and I'm like, yep, this is done. And sure enough, we hardly played any more moves. King d3, king e7, king e4, king d6, b4. And you can already see the skeleton of how we are going to win. King c6, f4. Now I'm preparing for the breakthrough on the king side. And the king actually must attend to this. He plays king d6. I play c5. And the poor king now wants to split into 2 to keep an eye on this pawn majority, but also to keep an eye on this guy running in. And of course, that is not possible. So after king e7, I just went a4. And yeah, there's nothing to be done against b5, c6. The king has to make a move this way. And then g5, take, take, take. And this guy runs in. This is how it ended. King d7, b5, take, take. King e7, c6, take, take. Actually, I was really cruel. I pushed past. The king had to go that way. And now comes the right jab from here. Take, take. And that's when he resigned. He is up 2 pawns. But it's not the number of the pawns, but the quality. I'm 2 moves away from touchdown. None of these pawns can hurt me. Happy days. And yeah, I was really, really happy with this game. I thought that this was a really high quality game on my end. And indeed, the computer actually confirmed the 96.5 accuracy level with 2 inaccuracies all up. So that was a really, really cool game. And I really enjoyed that. Out of the opening, I managed to stir the game toward that Caro Kann dream that was represented by the bishop on the diagonal and the pawns restricting the black pawn chain like this, and my pawns on f3, g4, h5. It just felt like, you know, when you learn a certain strategic concept and then you manage to get it on the board with perfection, that is one of the greatest satisfactions in chess. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I really did enjoy my many blitz games against Felix Izeta. He's a very nice guy. We had chats during and after the games. Really cool dude. So yeah, it was a great experience. I might revisit actually our games and offer you a few more. But for now, that is going to be it. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to sub, to like, to comment, please, and super thank me if you can. And I will see you in the next video soon. Bye.